good. Are we running?
Check.
What's that?
Rechecking. You've got my computer. I can't tell. Sorry. I think we are.
Let's check just to make sure.
I've got it.
Okay, all right. Call the Norton City Council Committee work session to order for Monday, November 19th, 2018. Please rise for a pledge of allegiance and a moment of prayer. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated. Would the clerk call the roll, please?
Mr. Gaynor,
Present.
Mr. McClone,
Here.
Mr. Carrot,
Mr. Karen is excused.
Mr. Towsley,
Here.
Ms. Whipkey,
Here.
Mr. Kernan,
Here.
Mr. Pelot.
Mr. Pelot's excused. Under new business, Committee of the Whole, letter A, presentation of proclamation for Ms. Wagner. Mayor Zita.
Thank you very much. This evening we have a couple of proclamations, one of them being for Ms. Wagner and the second one being for Ganley Ford. What I want to do is start off by just saying that the first proclamation is for Don Nicolard, excuse me. And Don Nicolard was a veteran of the Air Force as well as a longtime business owner here in the city and a past member of City Council. So, we had a little episode just last month, and he was helped out by one of the girls that worked in his office. So I have a proclamation here that I'd like to read and present to her on behalf of the city. And it just says, from the office of the mayor, proclamation, whereas the city of Norton is proud to recognize outstanding achievements, generous acts, and good deeds in our community. And whereas Miss Marcia Wagner of Donald Lloyd's Hair and Nail Studio has been dedicated to serving our community and neighbors, and whereas Miss Wagner was quick to action in response to an emergency in her place of employment by performing CPR on Mr. Donald Nicolard until the emergency squad personnel arrived and took over life-saving task in October of 2018. Now therefore be it resolved that I, Mike Zita, Mayor of the City of Norton, do hereby proclaim that on this 19th day of November in the year 2018, we are here to recognize and honor Marcia Wagner as a local hometown hero. In witness whereof, I hereunto set my hand and cause the seal of the City of Norton to be affixed on this date, the 19th day of November 2018. Mrs. Wagner?
Mayor,
Marcia, that wasn't too bad, was it?
Mayor, I think you have one more, do you?
Yes, I do. And the second one this evening, we have a proclamation for Ganley Ford. There was one of the members at Ganley Ford also needed CPR. I'm going to turn that one over to the chief. Chief Mike Schultz is here.
All right.
Chief, would you like to say something prior to us moving forward on that, or either one?
Good evening. There's roughly 400,000 cardiac arrests in the U.S. every year. There's 6% survival rate of that. My guys do a great job, but tonight we're here to honor the people who are really true heroes. Bystander CPR, without a doubt, saves lives. I've known both these guys for probably 20 years. So this one isn't easy for me, but I'm glad you're both here. And what you guys all did for them is absolutely amazing. Thank you.
And I have the second proclamation, which reads, whereas the City of Norton is proud to recognize outstanding achievements, generous acts, and good deeds in our community, and whereas Ganley Ford has been a long, outstanding business in our community and is known for its commitment to safety and for its employees through ongoing training and adhering to industry standards. Whereas several employees provided an exemplary example of teamwork when assisting a coworker during a medical emergency in June of 2018. Now therefore be it resolved that I, Mike Zeta, Mayor of the City of Norton, do hereby proclaim that on this 19th day of November in the year 2018, we are here to recognize and honor John Kirchenbauer, Service Manager, Sonny Augusta, Assistant Service Manager, and Darren Looper, Technician, as community heroes. In witness whereof, I have hereunto set my hand and caused the seal of the City of Norton to be affixed on this date, this 19th day of November, 2018. Gentlemen, would you come up, please? Done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. If anybody has a chance to be trained in CPR, I suggest you take it. I know the Summit County Juvenile Court trains us and recertifies us every couple of years, and I've taken it a couple of years, and thank God I never have had to use it, and God willing I never do, but you just hope that if something happens to you or a loved one, there's someone there who does know it, who can assist, because that first few minutes is critical. So I would suggest and encourage people to do that. Any other comments before we move on? Okay, letter C, Barberton Agreement for Administrative Services. This falls under Finance, Ordinance 119-2018. Mr. Fowler, do you want to speak to this?
I can speak to this
You
one.
want to speak to this,
Sure.
Mr.
The Barberton Prosecutor's Office, we employ two of their employees directly as prosecutors on behalf of the City of Norton within the Barberton Municipal Court. This is an agreement that allows us to share part of the back office expense of that. It's $5,000 a year for copy, paper, pens, all the things that the prosecutors need to do their job on behalf of the City of Norton. So that's what this agreement represents.
All right. And this has nothing to do with the prosecutors themselves.
Nope.
This is
That's a separate ordinance. They have a separate salary rate established under that ordinance. This is just for the back office operations.
All right. Any comments, questions?
Did you say that this was for 3 years?
How long did you say?
I believe it's 3 years.
3 years.
2019 through 2021?
Yep.
I recall reading that, I believe.
Yeah, our prior agreement was 3 years, and this is the final year of that prior agreement. So.
All right.
So this is just replacing a former agreement?
Yes, it's the same terms as the current agreement, which is ready to expire at the end of this year. So we're trying to get an agreement in place for the next 3 years.
Any further questions? Is there a timeline on this, or?
No, I think, and I know Mr. Messner would like to make a payment once he gets invoiced, but I don't think they invoice until pretty late in the year usually. So I think if it bleeds over, it bleeds over. But
So let's go maybe at least one reading next week, and then
At
we
least,
could
yeah, that's
suspend on the 2nd.
right, we've made the payment for 18, so this is
Okay.
really
All right.
no hurry.
Okay, all right.
Yep.
Is there a motion to put this on agenda for next week?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second. Call the roll, please.
Ms. Whipke?
Yes.
Mr. Kernan?
Yes. All right. Letter D, amend ordinance 72, 2018. Mr. McGlone?
Thank you, Mr. President. This is here to amend ordinance 72, 2018. This is the allocation of the civic penalties for the speed camera that we've been using. Administration would like to change that, and to the first 200 to go to Fund 114 solely to pay for the operating costs of the Division of the Police. The second 200 would go to Fund 140, which is the police equipment. And the rest of the money, 80% would go to road program and 20% would go to economic development. Did I say that correct, Robert?
Well, we were going to look at a 75-25 split, make it a little more.
Yeah, so Mr. McGlone, I think there's two changes that you guys don't have in front of you, but we had talked over the past week after we sent the ordinance in that we would like you guys to consider. The first is one, I made a mistake on the fund number. Fund 114 should actually be Fund 112. Mr. Messner pointed that out to me this morning. So I have a correction ordinance for you guys. And that's the same purpose. It's to provide the initial ordinance was drafted, kept the money in the general fund. The problem with the general fund is it flushes out every year. It drops down to the bottom line. And so our intent is to keep these funds with the police department, and Fund 112 will allow us to do that.
112 instead of 114?
112 instead of 114.
Okay.
And then the second one is, instead of doing an 80-20 split, 80% roads, 20% to economic development, we were going to ask for a 75-25 split for 75% roads, 25% economic development.
Okay, and just to go back to the old format, it was 250 for the first, and I'm assuming since we're not going to have a school resource officer, is that why we took that off right now?
Yeah, I think yes, that's exactly why I took it off.
I just
Yeah.
wanted to be clear.
Yep.
And then really the other ones were kind of like the funds we were using already. We just changed them around. I think we added economic development.
Yeah, it was a little more complicated. There was it was too complicated, so we
Well, I think
simplified
there were
it.
some funds there that, from last time, that weren't even established yet. Were they, Mr. Mess? Because I kind of looked for them.
That's correct. Yeah,
198, 199, and I didn't see those.
right. And we didn't bring that legislation forward because we had intended to change this ordinance, so that's
Okay.
why. So we brought forward what we needed to change to accommodate this change.
201's actually new too, isn't it?
What's that?
201 is a new fund.
201's a new
201,
fund.
yeah, for
Yes.
economic development.
But that was already, that legislation, I think, is before you already.
Yeah.
To establish 201.
Well, and I think it makes sense to take funding for the school resource officer out of this, because this money is not going to come in forever. Once the project's done, this is gone. And so if we're going to do a school resource officer, if we ever come to that type of an agreement with the schools, we have to figure out where that money is going to come from ongoing.
That's correct. And the money could come from Fund 112. It's just
Right.
not, because there's no proposal on the table. That's why it was
Right.
taken out. And I think I'll let it go. Go ahead.
Well, I would have to say, excuse me, that I know we need to put some money into this economic development fund, but I'm really loath to take any way from the roads.
Yeah.
I'd like to keep it the way it is. We need to get these done as much as we can to the best of our ability. We still have too many of them that are waiting to get taken care of outside of, like the Cleveland Massillon and the Nash Heights and places where we've basically been forced into having to do it. And I'd like to see us get our roads done, because that itself plays into economic development.
Yeah, it's kind of, and it's really just a recommendation, and Mr. Fowler can add to this if he wants. What we really had talked about was it's sort of 6 1 half dozen the other. I mean, the more economic development you're able to do, the better your income tax base is, the more roads you can do with the funds you have. I mean, but to your point, if you have better roads, then maybe that's an economic development advantage as well. So it's really council's decision. We're just making a recommendation. So.
But I will say, from the first one to the second one, I kind of figured out whatever we're going to get, but it's really close to what we were giving to the road program already, really.
Yeah, I think it might
It
even
isn't too much of a difference.
might even be more, because you're taking the 50,000 away from
Yes.
police and 75% going to roads. I think it might even be more. It's close.
No,
Yeah.
excuse me, but I did figure it up, and just currently on what it is that they were looking at now at the, what is it, the $1,080,000 coming in, 80,000. The first 400,000 would be going to the police department through 112 and what was the other one? 140. And then after that, that left a remaining 680,000, and divided up with the 80-20%, that the 680 went 544,000 for roads and 136 for economical development. So I think it's a step in the right direction, and it's money well spent. I don't know where we could have done it any better.
I agree.
And Mr. Kern, I remember the point I lost earlier. The one thing I wanted to mention with the Fund 112 is that the intention would be to pay for that step enforcement that we discussed last week, the manned enforcement. We would pay for that overtime hours out of this Fund 112.
Okay.
So
So continuing that enforcement
Continuing
on
the
76,
enforcement.
but in a different manner.
correct.
Yeah. Mr. Towsley, I'm sorry.
I hope I didn't just miss what I'm about to ask, so I apologize. When the calendar year turns, that makes no difference on these numbers, correct? In other words, if this project were to start back up in the spring, it just builds to where it is, correct?
So that's, I think there was some confusion out there about how the money was allocated, and some people thought that it started over as opposed to continuing to build. I think the way this is written now, it continues to build. But we can go back and look at the ordinance and double check that, but that's the.
So if it were to continue in the spring, the road, under the new proposal, the roads and the economic development would essentially receive 100% of what's new.
Yeah, and let me look at the ordinance again. I just want to make sure I'm remembering, and going from memory now and how it's written, but I want to verify that before we.
I mean, just reading the plain language of the ordinance, that's the way it looks.
Yeah.
It doesn't split it into fiscal years or anything. So that's kind of the way I looked at it when I read it.
Yeah.
That the first 200,000, it says civil penalties collected, so that's all civil penalties collected.
Didn't it say per year?
Yeah, I think it's per year. And that's why I want to double check it and just confirm.
I thought it
But
was per year
that's why I didn't have it in front of me. Yeah. I
for
don't have the
both
ordinance.
of them, and then it just.
So what you're saying is you're going to make it per year if it isn't in
Yeah.
there already.
When we originally brought to council, I think the intention, and I don't want to be confusing about it, but I think the intention was to do it per year. Yeah, it's per year deposited to 140, and per year.
Oh, I see. Okay,
Okay.
down in
Yep.
I see down in A and B.
So it looks like, okay, so not to confuse it more, but this is good that we're talking about. The A has Fund 112, doesn't say per year, but B, Fund 140 does say per year.
Okay.
Oh, no, it's per year to 112, okay.
It says per year.
Yeah, never
in
mind.
A
So both
too.
are per year. So the intention under this ordinance is that next year, if we were to run the program again, that it would fill those buckets again. Another 400,000 the police department before the rest.
Okay.
But again, this is really council's call.
Right.
It wouldn't have to be a calendar year, just that it's done for the season now. So
Yeah.
whatever is here now, or whatever comes in, because really it's not here as yet. And then whatever happens next year, it starts all over again.
That's the way it's written, yeah. So sorry to.
I would, if I
Speak
could,
about
I
that.
would only suggest that if that's changed, to make certain that it's not going to affect the outcome of the someone fighting the tickets. So they can't say that we changed the ordinance, and so the ticket's no longer valid or something. I don't.
Yeah, I don't think there's a concern there about how we allocate the funds we receive.
I wouldn't think so, but
Yeah.
I just wanted to make certain.
Okay, yeah, I understand.
I wouldn't care either way. I mean, as far as monetary,
Yeah.
Okay, so
money
So-
still wouldn't be there.
now this confuses me a little more. Is it calendar year 2018 and 19, or from the time that ordinance 72 passed that year?
I would read, okay, so the way I read the language, which everything's up to interpretation, the way I read the language is per year is per calendar year. And so you'd fill the police buckets first next year. If we ran the program in the spring, the way it's written right now, 400,000 goes to the police department, then we do the split again.
Can we make this so it's not left up to interpretation?
I'm fine. I mean, it's really, again, it's council's call, how you guys want to split it, so.
And I'm kind of, I think as much as we can should go to the roads, but at the same time, we can't ignore the future by ignoring economic development. So, it's just my 2 cents, I guess.
I think for ease of accounting and keeping track of it, perhaps where we say per year, we could just insert the word calendar,
Or fiscal, yeah,
fiscal,
yeah.
either one, so that's clear. And then the only other thing that I've heard is there's some question as to whether it should be 75-25 or 80-20.
I think they already said they made the change to 75-25.
But
They can't make the
No,
twist
I
change.
mean,
they're requesting 75-25.
Oh, okay.
But Charlotte was saying she liked it better at the 80-20 that
Oh,
they
okay.
originally said. So we probably need to decide that before we move this to the agenda.
Mr. Kerner?
Yes. Mr. Fowler.
Rather than delay any conversation, I think it's better for us to move this forward and get it on the agenda. And then if they're at 80-20 is fine, let's just get the allocation changed. There's some significance to the reason and the rationale behind the ordinance, and
Okay.
we hope that we can get this passed quickly.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to delay this, but
Okay.
the police chief is not here to speak for himself, but is it necessary for the police to get another shot next year? In other words, are we withholding from roads for something that, I mean, I'm guessing he's going to say it's necessary because who wouldn't want more money in their department, but I just want to make sure we look at roads very carefully.
But couldn't we relook at it again next year and see where we're standing on everything and then
Sure.
decide again? It's not like this is written in stone
Right.
in the charter or anything
Okay.
that we can't actually work with it. It's not bound, I don't believe, any way in the code. It can go
No, it's really
where,
up to council to decide how it wants the money to go.
And in the police budget this year, for next year, is that extra $400,000 in there, assuming it is? Well, this 400,000 will be in there.
It's in separate funds, but
Oh,
the police
gotcha.
department budget is in the
Gotcha.
general fund. It did decrease, but not because of this.
Okay, all right.
yeah, this is not included in the 2019 budget we're looking at, mostly because we have no idea really when it's,
This is in addition to.
Gotcha.
okay.
Okay.
And in 2019, there would be no reason at all why those funds cannot be diverted to another spot. Is that correct?
Correct.
Fire
2019,
department-
Correct.
you could choose to fund whatever you want
That's
with
right.
those
That's right.
with those fines. But to Mr. I don't know who asked about the budget. Whoever asked about the budget, it is representing the revenue line of Fund 112.
Right.
Is the 200,000 for next
Right,
year.
right.
So there's anticipation
Right,
that would happen.
okay.
What did the difference make if we went to 75-25 on these amounts?
the dollar
that we're looking at?
difference?
Yes.
I don't know offhand.
I'll get that for you for the next meeting.
I'm thinking maybe lowering down the roads down to 515 or something and bringing the other up possibly to 150.
Yeah, yeah.
All right.
Anyone else have any more questions on this? I'd like to put this for first reading here, next council meeting.
Is that a motion, Mr. McGlone?
Ordinance 120, 2018.
Yes.
That's a motion.
I will second.
Clerk, call the roll.
Mr. McClone?
Yes.
Mr. Towesley?
Yes.
And Robert, just to make sure, this is, as long as we pass it before our last meeting of the year. Okay.
All right. Letter E, appointment of Robert Fowler to the Tax Incentive Review Council. Mr. Towesley.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is, this Tax Incentive Review Council really needed to be filled back in January, if I remember correctly. And we just haven't had any volunteers, so Mr. Fowler willingly said he would step up at least until someone else volunteers.
Correct.
So I'd like to thank Mr. Fowler for being willing to do that, and this is just an attempt to get that seat filled until someone else might step in.
And anybody who steps up, Mr. Tousley, I'd be glad to allow them to have it.
Sure
It
you
is.
would.
It really is one meeting a year.
Now, be careful what we say.
I know. You know what I
Anybody.
mean. It's one meeting a year, and it reviews like the CRAs, and it's at the county. If you recall, Mr. Spizak was also appointed to that board. A member of the auditor, or well, it's not officer, it's auditor here. It's fiscal officer, and some other folks are on that board as well. So yes, I just did it reluctantly to make sure we have our fill on the board.
Mr. Towesley, just not to belabor this point, but I also was appointed this year, and anyone who wants to take my spot is welcome to apply as well. So just to throw it out there, I don't want to be on the board.
Same remark to you.
Now, one thing.
Those person that applies, would have to be approved by council, correct?
Yes. That's correct.
Okay, because
One thing I've noticed.
possibility, we might not want who.
Right.
They have to have some capabilities, I'm
Yeah.
assuming.
One thing I've noticed looking at the resolution, I believe there's a typo. It says it commences November 1st, 2018 and expires October 31st, 2018. Would that be 21 or 20?
I have to look at the terms, so we'll find it.
It's definitely not 2018.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely not 2018.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
And I assume there's not any real hurry on this, or is the meeting forthcoming?
No, meeting is in, typically it's in May.
May.
So we have plenty of time to get it done.
Okay, so I will make a motion that we move this forward with the correction.
Second. Second.
He said so.
Call the roll.
Mr. Towesley?
Yes.
Mr. Gaynor?
Yes.
All right, on to the 2019 budget. Mr. Messner?
Can everybody see the screen okay, or do we need to turn the lights off?
I
can see
just
it.
turn that one bank off if you want.
If you want to. Might make it a little clearer.
I got it. It's the green button.
Okay, we've got, Mr. Pelot has on the schedule to go over the general fund. In the expenses, it's page 1 to page 22. And as I indicated last week, I'm going to leave it up to council. You ask whatever questions you want to ask.
So I would then open the floor for any questions. Probably the easiest way to do this is, I was going to say work from the beginning back, but let's just open up the floor and for any questions.
It basically starts with council and
Right.
goes from there.
Right. Any questions regarding the budget for council?
I do have one.
Mr. Towesley?
Professional service went from 0 to almost 21,000.
I'm going to ask our clerk to answer that question because it's basically her and Mr. Pelot requesting it.
I have the same question.
Okay, that's fine. Mr. Pelot has asked me to investigate software that will make our minutes and agendas searchable on the website for our residents. And there are a couple of different programs that seem to be most popular among all the clerks in the state. One is OnBase, and the other is Civic Plus. The OnBase program is what the city has purchased to do the scanning of documents. Unfortunately, for us to be able to scan the documents on OnBase, then have them communicate with our website through Civic Plus so that they then can become searchable using optical character recognition, the cost is around $20,000. Now, Civic Plus has a program called Civic Clerk, and it will make all of the PDFs of our minutes and our agendas OCR readable, so that anybody can go on to our website and put in a keyword like Wolf Creek or whatever, and every document that has that phrase in it will come up for them. Okay. Currently, we don't have that ability.
What I would like to know is why are they not readable now? Why is it whatever's on there, they just can't search it now? But even if they had it personally, or because I know I have the program and I can search
Yes.
PDFs.
If you individually, you can buy your own software. I think Mr. Pelot, in the interest of being transparent and accountable, wants the city to have it available to all residents to do that, whether or not they own the PDF. Which one do you have? PDF Creator or something? There's a number of programs that each individual person could purchase, and so that they could then, use that. But this will allow all of the documents to be searched through OCR.
Well, I'll go back to my original question. Why are they not searchable the way they are without having to change them? Why are the ones online not searchable?
You'd have to get to Civic Plus and ask them that question, but I think the technology is just not there.
It's not the way that we scan it.
It's not the way we scan it, no. And it's not the program that we purchased.
Because I know even the ones that you send us in the email, I still have to change them over to searchable after we get them.
Yes, that is true. And the OCR capability is just now coming online with the Civic Clerk program for Civic Plus. So it is a new technology, and there are several communities and municipalities that are researching it. And the two that keep coming back are OnBase and Civic Plus.
So they're researching it.
To see if it, yeah.
And we're just putting 20,000 back to actually purchase it.
Well, the OnBase program that the city owns does not have the capability. And in order for me even to have it on my side, for me to be able to search documents by incorporating OnBase into the documents that I scan, will cost a minimum of $6,000.
You don't have the $180 program in there to be able to search the PDFs you currently have in your database.
No, and we're going to have to scan them one way or another, either through OnBase or through Civic Plus, just so that they are retrievable.
This could save you time on public requests too, couldn't it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and it gives people the ability, I mean, they have the ability now to search anonymously. We don't require people to give us their name or address or the reason they're requesting the records, but it just allows them to search at their leisure, what they want, when they want.
Well, if we buy this software and a person calls in and says, I'd like to have such and such a piece of information, are we then legally going to be able to tell them, if we bought this software, that we're no longer going to pull this information for you, you can go to such and such a point?
No.
So you have to do it anyway for them.
If they
Oh, sure.
request it.
So it's not really going to allow the public to go online and pull up information.
It will allow them to do it so
They could
if
if they
they
didn't wanna
so
bother.
choose.
That's what I'm saying, though. If they didn't want to do it on their computer, all they would have to do anyway is call you and say, Carrie, I understand you have a program now. Look this up for me, correct?
Yeah.
So, I don't know.
I'll tell you why, because the older community isn't going to do it like,
No, they're not.
it's
No, they're
the
not.
younger generation is going to do it themselves.
That's correct.
So that
I-
has a lot to do with
I
it.
think about maybe a fourth of Norton would have the urge or the ability, computer savvy, to look that up themselves.
Yes.
And the other 3/4 are going to be still calling you and having you look it up. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I don't have any problem. I call you myself and ask
Oh,
for
right.
information. And truthfully, I don't believe I could look it up on the computer unless I had a class in it. And I know we're not going to give everybody in Norton a class.
No, and it'll be very user friendly. People that are currently looking at our website and reading the minutes, there's a search bar at the top, and that's where you can put things in. Unfortunately, right now, the way that the program runs, there are two groups, if you will. If you're going to search minutes, you're either going to look at, or agendas, you're either going to get boards and commissions or city council. And that's all it searches right now, are those two headings. So that's of no use.
How is that of no use?
There's no subject content. If you're,
So all you can,
all
you're
you
gonna
get
come
is
up-
whether it's a
here's the
council.
minutes,
yeah,
okay, as opposed to a specific.
yeah. If you want specific information or you want to do any research, and right now we do have CDs of past minutes, and I've been adding them onto the website. So I've got 2016 up now. But, we, as a council, you should probably make a decision on how far back you want to have access on the website. 5, 10 years, I would, or all the way back to 1962. I mean,
Well, my view is that we should always err in favor of transparency and ease for the public to get the information that they need. Listen, there should be no great secrets here. There are no great secrets here. We have open meetings. We have them on streaming live. I don't have a problem with this at all. I mean, I think I think a citizen should be able to go into the minutes and find what they want to find with as little difficulty as possible. And if they choose not to do that and they want to come and put in a public records request, you know what, that's fine too. Because this is their council, this is their house. They're entitled to that information. Is a little bit of sticker shock, yeah. it seems a little pricey. But I mean, if it does what it's supposed to do, and that's what's out there, that's what's out there.
it's definitely the high end.
So,
But I'm not saying that it would actually cost that much, but until we actually get a scope of work.
and here's the way I look at it. This is an allocation. Doesn't mean we're buying it.
Right.
There is more research to be done. There would have to be
New ordinance.
an ordinance to allocate the funds. This isn't the end of this discussion regarding this, but we at least owe it to the public to look at it and to have that discussion.
Have you compared the two programs? You gave us the price of the one, but the Civic Plus, is that in the same range?
No, the Civic Plus is significantly different because the quote that I looked at included the civic clerk program as well as a program for boards and commissions, which the administrative assistant would take more advantage of than I would. I would use the civic clerk, and she wouldn't take as much advantage of that. But it allows for online agendas. It allows for, at least on the boards and commissions, it gives her the ability to watch as terms are coming up and replacing people and alerting them. And there's just a lot of different, it's very dynamic. Both of the programs are very dynamic. Now, whether we buy both of them is another story. But that's the quote I was talking about with the Civic Plus. Was a little bit higher, but it had more to it. It's more robust in its offerings.
But I'm talking costs. Are they both similar in cost?
Civic Plus, I believe, is less.
Okay. So they're
Because
both-
the problem with the on-base,
That's fine.
is that they're two separate programs. And so in order to get one to communicate to the other, it took a lot of work between the engineers and to determine what was going to be necessary. And I have that scope of work and the professional hours billed out. And that was a lot more expensive.
We're not going to run into that problem again to where it's going to just, oh yeah, we're going to get it eventually.
No, I talked with Civic Plus about if we own it or do they own it, that kind of a problem. Is that what you're referring to? If they,
All I know is that in the past, our software
We've had software
programs
difficulties.
have
okay,
been a real pain.
okay, I'm not aware. But the only thing that I learned from the beginning of this research was these two programs are not compatible, and so it will require some engineering to make them compatible. So I question the relevance of using the on-base to scan something that the public's not going to be able to read.
Right.
We'll be able to read it. Everybody here in the city can read it and search, but they won't. And I think the intent of Mr. Pilot is to get this out to the public.
Is that going to, when you scan something then, is that going to make it readable at that point? You know what I'm saying, right?
Here in the city, for me, yes, I will be able to.
But what you send to us isn't going to be any more readable.
Oh, no.
Than what
Because
it
you're
is
looking
now.
at, you're looking at it on your own systems. Now, the civic clerk is web-based, so you can use it on any of your devices.
Well, if they're accessing that, the computer itself, the program itself is going to know who's accessing. Basically do from the ILP or whatever, yes? I would be thinking.
But it's not the software, which is proprietary.
If we buy this software, if we buy this software, and anybody with any program, me, you, or the neighbor, get online and pull up anything that's scanned into that information base.
Yes,
With any type of a piece of equipment, a laptop, an iPad,
yes.
whatever.
The
We can-
civic clerk, the Civic Plus, yes.
That's the $20,000 one.
No,
The $20,000 one.
is the one that is, you take your on-base that have been scanned on and get them to communicate with Civic Plus.
Well, like Mr.
So
Kernan
again-
said,
So you have to have
it's,
them both.
No, I don't. I can do all of it with just what we have on our website, the webmaster.
So what I would say is, and I certainly think that we need to talk about this a little bit more. However, right now we don't need to talk about it tonight. No.
yeah, we're not
Now what we
deciding.
need to talk about is whether or not we're going to allocate this money, and then in the future we can have this discussion
Yes.
as part of a committee of the whole, and then decide whether or not we're going to buy it or not.
Right.
But right now we need to move through the budget.
Right.
So.
And like you said, Joe, even though we're allocating, doesn't mean we're gonna spend it anyways if
Correct.
we don't purchase it.
Correct. So, any other questions regarding the clerk of council's budget, or council's budget? It's not the clerk's budget, it's council's budget.
Well, I have one.
Paul?
I think I know the answer, but just for getting it out there. Office supplies going up. Is that personal iPads? Is that what that's about?
Okay.
And there again, we're just budgeting a number. It doesn't mean that we will spend it for that. It'll take a lot more discussion and getting council comfortable.
Right.
So it's a placeholder.
Okay.
If we decide to spend it, we will. If not, we won't.
Okay. Okay. All good with council's budget. All right, let's move on. Any questions regarding what's the next one? Mayor's office.
Mayor.
Any questions? Going once? Going twice? On to the next one, administrative officer. Any questions regarding the administrative officer's budget? Going once? Going twice?
I think the only changes here was we moved from employee went from part-time to full-time.
Any more questions? On to community development. Any questions regarding community development? Anything? Once, twice, on to building and zoning. Anything regarding building and zoning? Any questions?
Again, we have professional services getting boosted largely. Just an explanation would be nice.
That is to cover coursework for Bill Brayman
Okay.
and also for safe-built fees.
For what?
Safe-built
Oh.
fees.
Robert explained.
Robert can explain safe-built.
One of the things we've discussed is reinvigorating our building department. If we are to do that, we've looked at this outside agency to provide that service. They do it on right now we do it on a per inspection basis. They're the reason that AP Gas got torn down.
Right.
So we just wanted to have an allocation set aside if we move forward with bringing the building department back in-house, that we have a way to pay for that.
Okay. Any other questions regarding that? Everybody good? Going once, twice, the Department of Finance. Any questions regarding finance, please?
There are two items that have changed here. Audit fees and CAFR fees. Those used to be located under general government. I never understood why, since they're really my expenses in my department, why they weren't under my department. So we basically set up new account numbers and moved them. So there was a reduction of those amounts in the general government side. You'll see zeros over there when we get there, and we moved the expense here.
So it's just moving that money from one place to another.
That's correct.
Right. That was, just for everybody's knowledge, that was 51,000, correct?
Correct.
Okay, all right. Any other questions regarding the Department of Finance? Going once, twice, on to income tax. Any questions regarding the income tax budget?
There's a slight increase in the JED-Z payment to Barberton. We have $100,000 that we're paying off $25,000 each quarter with an agreement that Mr. Markey worked out with them. So this will be the last year. 2019 is the last year, and then that 100,000's paid.
So that's money already owed that we're just going to pay off this year?
That's correct.
Okay.
So we're paying them the normal quarterly JED-Z fee plus an additional $25,000. It was,
Barber Road.
should I say, somewhat of a dispute over different businesses that we weren't paying that they thought we should, and we negotiated the settlement.
Yeah, there was just historically there was not a good way for the community to talk to figure out what was a new business versus an old. So we were able to come together and get to an agreement on how we determine what's a new business versus a continuing business. A lot of negotiating involved.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions regarding income tax? Going once, twice, police?
We've already done
Did
police.
police?
So we'll turn to page 10, which is general government.
General government.
One big change at the top, record secretary, which is actually Janice Back. She receives a partial salary to handle the records of the city, the RC3. There again, we have a record secretary budget. I never understood why we paid her salary out of the general government budget. So you'll see these are zeros, and I've moved that budget over to the records, and you'll see when we get there, you'll see that. And you'll notice partway down, the audit and the CAFR, you'll see 00 in 2019.
Okay. And that's where they moved back.
That's where they
on the
moved back to
previous.
Finance Department.
Any further questions regarding general government? Anything else? Going once, twice, law director. Questions regarding the law director's budget?
We kind of made a move out of the hourly legal services. Since Justin is actually a part-time employee of the city, we decided to move all of the legal services up into the professional service line.
Okay.
That is increased because we do have 6 eminent domain cases. So it's hard to tell. I'm trying to, hopefully I've budgeted enough, but
Where would we find that number reflected in previous years for comparison?
for,
If you add
it's just the line
the
down
first two
below.
lines together, so 30,250 plus 160,000. That's how it's budgeted last year. So
Okay.
it's an increase of about $35,000. And not to mention, there's another
okay.
lawsuit outside the eminent domain lawsuits that currently is
okay.
being done.
Yeah, we've had eminent domain this past year as well, correct?
That's correct.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
How many cases did we have this past year?
I'd have to get the exact number. It was that actually went to trial. There was one that
8 of them? 8?
8 or 9. There was
We had a
bunch.
couple that we had mediations that were resolved at mediation that all came before council.
Right. One that was on the eve of trial and settled. So it's just
So if we have less cases, why are we budgeting more?
I think part of the legal fees are paid out of the Cleveland-Maslin Road Fund, so that this what you're seeing here as expenses isn't all covered, isn't all the litigation, and so the
It's
intent
for some
was to
other
put more of
things.
the litigation cost into this fund to
Okay.
properly account for it. And the Cleveland-Maslin Road Fund, Ron can get you that information, I'm sure, has some of those legal expenses from the eminent domain cases, because you get reimbursed. You got reimbursed the 80%.
90%.
90%, sorry, because it's acquisition, that's right, 90%.
Did that answer your question, Paul? I'm not sure I got that. Could you
Yeah,
It's,
it's okay. Yeah, go
repeat
ahead.
that for me?
Go ahead.
it's really kind of a throw the dart and try to project.
Okay.
And as going back again to my theory, I always try to project expenses high, revenues low. I'm projecting 225,000. Do I have a way to get there? Not really. I'm just basing it, we did have 9 this year. We did have significant legal expense with these. I hope we don't spend that. And then we might. And we may end up spending more. It all depends on who wants to drag it out and how long our two attorneys have to, work.
So what I hear you saying is that you would rather estimate a bit high so that you account for it, rather than estimating low and having to find that money later or come back to us and say,
And that's what I would have to do. If I estimate this 225 low, then I've got to come back to council and
Right.
say, it's now 250,000, I need $25,000 more.
But we didn't come up short this year.
No.
No, because we were out of money in the law direct, well, we didn't come up all the way there, but a lot of those funds got moved over to the Cleveland-Maslin Road Construction Fund. because those were advances, right? So we paid the money out of the construction fund, and then the state reimbursed that money back to the construction fund. So probably to get you a more accurate picture, I can get you the billings to date for the year and show it by case so you can see what it costs for each case.
That might be
Anything
helpful.
you can do would.
Yeah, I can we can generate that report pretty easily and then tie
I
it
would go
back
ahead
to
and do
what
that.
Mr. Messner has on his side.
All right.
That'd be easy to do.
Okay. Yeah, if we could do that, then we can
Sure.
take a look at that.
Sure, no problem.
Any other questions regarding law director? All right, on to the engineer. Any questions regarding the engineer's budget?
I guess I do again.
Towsley?
I'd just like a little explanation. I was kind of under the understanding that we actually were going to save just a couple $1,000s going with a firm as opposed to the employee that we had, but this is up quite a bit, so.
Actually, we're budgeting here not only for GPD, we're also budgeting $18,000 for an engineering intern and $5,000 for miscellaneous engineering is what makes the increase.
So, Mr. Fowler.
Yeah. So we contacted the University of Akron to bring in, and I thought we had this conversation one time, we didn't, apologize, but to bring in an intern into the office to update our road study. So starting January 1, we would get an intern from Akron to be part-time for the year.
Would that be as opposed to doing another Benza study?
Yes.
Okay.
He's just here to update the study. There are some other things that we have allocated for him, but my goal is to reduce the demand on the city engineer in terms of some of the things that I think should be our priority, like that study. Now, he'll work under myself and the city engineer, but the idea was the 50,000 is budgeted, but we only, like the first month, I think we spent 4,000. The goal is not to use that 5,000, right? And if anything I can do to bring in a little lower cost option, that's what that is.
Okay.
Any other questions regarding the engineer's budget? Anything else? Once, twice, parks. Any questions regarding the parks budget?
There's two items here. Professional services went up from 300 to 8,500. We've budgeted monies in that line for EDG consulting. And the last line, bicentennial, I cannot drop the name without dropping the history. And so we've added hyphen festival. So any festivals that the city would want to bring into the park through the year, we've actually budgeted $25,000. So those are the two main ones.
And what is EDG for the parks?
I'll defer to Mr. Fowler.
The master plan study, one thing we're looking at
Okay.
we've been told we're more than likely going to get CDBG funding.
Okay.
So we need to plan that project.
All right, so we budget this, and that probably gives us more points for the funding.
Yes.
Okay.
So the festival, is this a new concept going forward that we haven't had in the past?
It could be. I think it's something that we saw such success with some of the things that we did at Bicentennial that just kind of opened our thought process to maybe we want to try something different. Maybe we want to bring in a summer group, musical group, or whatever. Bicentennial really opened
or something, yeah.
up a lot of potential. So here again, it's just putting money aside so that if we want to do that, we do have seed money there that we have something to fall back on. We may do it, we may not do it.
Any further questions regarding that or discussion?
Does the city benefit off these festivals other than the residents or the vendors or the city itself?
Well, there's probably, I mean, I would make the argument that there's a benefit as far as goodwill and community spirit, camaraderie. So that's a non-tangible, right? You know, I don't know if people go to the festival and go out to eat afterwards, or if people come in from somewhere. I don't know.
Right.
But I suppose that's possible.
Anytime you draw people to the community, of course it's going to benefit the city. If you draw 100,000 people here, they're not just coming through in their vehicle and going on through. They're going to stop and eat a burger at McDonald's or someplace. Or they're going to buy permits for vendors like you asked. Is it going to benefit the vendors? Yeah, the vendors are going to pay for permits to be a vendor. If that's the type of occasion that it is, anything that you have in the city that draws people in, it's a win-win.
Any further discussion? Again, this is an item that we would have to allocate, or Board of Control would have to approve, come back through council. So again, it's just allocating the funds to be there if we decide to do something like that.
The 50,000 last year was all donated, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, correct.
Anything else?
And we still have a little bit of those funds left. We didn't spend all of them.
Looks like there might be just shy of $6,000 left. Somewhere around in
about
there.
5 to 6.
Yeah.
And I assume this would be an additional to the cider festival? Or is that up to interpretation?
No, I would think that's correct. Cider Festival basically is run by the cider committee.
So would that mean they would not have the option of turning to this?
Yeah, we don't, we really don't provide, other than monies to them for the cider festival. They basically bring their money in through their vendors, paying their fees, the vendor fees and stuff like that. We do provide service department, trash pickup, stuff like that. That's about our donation to the Cider Fest.
Police department services.
That's right,
I mean, the
police
service
department,
departments
fire
do
department.
participate, in which we would expect them that to continue.
Okay.
Anything else? Any other questions regarding that? All right, on to Planning Commission. Questions?
There's one big change here, and that's 20,000 under a new account line called Zoning Code Review. And I'll let Mr. Fowler speak to that if he would so desire.
We're trying to update some areas of the zoning code that are confusing, and like subdivision regulations. As new subdivisions come in, we want to update those. Make sure that they have standards that we feel are appropriate for us. And that's for, in order to accomplish that, we're going to need some help getting that done, and that's where that money was allocated.
Can't imagine that we've done anything with this code in years.
And again, we're going to do it by subdivision and make sure that we have things for new subdivisions the way they should be, so we can.
Right. Further questions? On to Parks and Rec Board. Any questions regarding Parks and Recreation? Going once, twice. On to Building and Zoning Board. Any questions regarding the Building and Zoning Board? We see a big jump. What's
Nothing's really changed there much. The land grant and demolition expense are still the same.
okay?
Those are basically there if there's things that need to
Oh,
be
yeah.
demolished or land grant, whatever.
It's interesting. It looks like we did not spend a lot of that money this year.
That's correct.
Okay.
Well, the one that we did have demolished, I think the owner actually stepped up and took over that cost.
Yep. All right. Any other questions regarding Building and Zoning Board? Once, twice. Health Advisory Board?
That's
Done?
Yep, should not even be in your book. It's a
Okay.
defunct fund.
No such animal.
No such animal. Moving on, Civil Service Commission.
There's one big item, one big jump there. That's testing, and that's just planning for civil service tests that need to be given in various sections of the city.
Okay. Any other questions? On to Records Commission.
You'll see the top part that was all zeros in prior years. You'll see the new funds that are there. That was moved over from the general government
Oh,
account.
yeah. That's the one you were talking about where you moved it over.
Janice back,
Yep,
we moved the
okay.
salary into this budget.
All right. Any further questions regarding Records Commission? Once, twice, Storm Sewer Fund.
Couple of things here. Stormwater maintenance, the second line, that is increased to 26,000, and part of that is for a Wolf Creek monitor to monitor Wolf Creek. And the last one, professional services, the 50,000. That one is a new account line, and that is for flood mitigation study that we've been talking about forever.
You did.
So the Township of Copley, the City of Norton have agreed to joint funding of this study. We're working on getting a third party. The idea is that the three entities could facilitate the study to figure out what improvements we could make in certain sections of the district that would help us alleviate some of the flooding. So we're not paying for the full freight of the study. The goal is to have three entities pay, but Copley, as of right now, and Norton have agreed.
This would be the flooding that we would be referring to Barber Road, which is happening more and more often,
Correct.
which has needed some attention for a long time.
Barber Road 261.
Well, how didn't we just do a study and one Mr. Demboski involved in that when we were looking at the watershed?
I think Mr. Nabowski was tasked with just looking inside of Norton. This study will be expanded beyond our borders and will help us to identify mitigation that could be jointly funded outside of the city. For example, the city and Copley Township, along with the city of Barberton, applied for an Army Corps grant up in the Little Farms area to do some restoration that would help alleviate some of the flooding. Those are the kind of projects that we're trying to identify, that there are monies available to help us accomplish our goal.
Because what my understanding is that this has to be something that's done between all of the communities, because the problem involves all of the communities. There's problems upstream. There's problems all along.
Once the water gets here, it's
Right.
almost
It's
too late.
It's
Yeah.
too late.
Once the water's in Norton, it's
Right.
too late. Right.
But there again, I'm confused about, I know we spent like 100,000 on the Little Farms area where we went in with Copley and Barberton, and I attended those watershed conservancy meetings, and I know that the information brought forth was not just from Norton, that was from outside the area too. So this has nothing to do with that? None of this can be reintroduced and used here?
Yeah,
we-
if I could, if
We
you're
had
done,
bought we
Charlie.
had bought a gauge or a monitor or something.
Exactly, that we already put in Wolf Creek.
I just recently pulled the files from Cary on Wolf Creek, and there is an extensive study in there that shows each and every single tree that's across Wolf Creek. It shows where the tributaries, all of the tributaries, ditches, tributaries that are named and unnamed. It shows each and every single blockage in color. I mean, they're perfect pictures. I don't know if you've ever seen those, Mayor, but if someone was to pull that file that she has in there and look at it, you'll see that we already have, I think our engineers should look at that file, and this was 2016 or 14, I forget.
Started in 14.
Anyway, it's only been 3 or 4 years ago that this study was done, and it was it's the most extensive look that I've ever seen at Wolf Creek. I mean, you wouldn't even have to be from this area to know exactly where they're talking about. They're discussing soap suds coming in at 261 in Wolf Creek. They're discussing this exact tree and a picture of the tree leaning across the creek and blocking the debris and causing backup. I mean, they show pictures of it, not discussions about it. They show the whole thing. And that study is extensive. And I hesitate to believe that there could ever be a study done that's more clear in scope than the study that we already have. If somebody was to look at it in the engineering department, our new engineers, and look at that study that's already been done.
When was that study done?
It took them a long time to do. It took them well over
It was basically
a year.
my recollection, which is always dangerous, is that it was a hydrology study, and it was basically figuring out. I mean, the idea was if it rains 3 days later, how much water's coming down, where's it coming from?
It had that too.
Yeah, but I think that was the main thrust of it, and I think there were some recommendations based on it. Yeah.
If you look at these, Justin, you'll see it had nothing. I mean, the major part of the study wasn't just the amount of flow and everything. The major part of the study, at least that I was interested in, was identifying the backups, where the creeks have been altered since 19. I don't know. I can't think of the date. 28 or something. It goes clear back to there, and it shows you a picture, an actual picture of the existing structure of Wolf Creek, and I mean a picture, not a artist rendering. It shows you a picture of the exact place where there's a tree across it or whatever is blocking it. Then it shows you how the Wolf Creek used to run back in 28 or 38 or whatever it was. It compares the two, and it tells what needs to be done to correct all these things. And the main thing that I could get from the study was that it needs to be cleared out and all these things taken out. And there are suggestions as to retention ponds. All of that stuff is covered in there. I mean, it's like a study that you would think was going to be done for Wolf Creek watershed. That's what I thought I had in hand.
The only thing I would I don't disagree with anything you're saying. I would just point out that this is for budget purposes only.
Exactly.
We're not. There still has to be an RFQ process. Yep. There has to be an engineer selected. There has to be a contract between the communities on sharing funding, engaging the engineer. So I mean, we could talk about whether it's worth doing.
Right.
Well, it's not. I'm sorry. I don't mean to interrupt you. It's not whether. I'm not saying we shouldn't do something about it, but I don't think we should allocate more funds for something unless our engineers look at this present study that we have presently. I don't think there should be any more money allocated until he looks at this study and
I think
says,
that will come down that's the idea, right? I mean that's the concept.
Putting it in the budget and actually spending it is two different items, and I have no problem trying to get rid of the flooding however we can, but I just wanted to stress that I do know that we have information and we need to utilize what it is that we've already paid for and has been done and initiated into this, because I know there's some value in there. Like I said, I attended those meetings, so I remember what was shown and how they worked. But other than that, I wouldn't have a problem. We have to address it. It needs to be done. It's for everybody's benefit. And saying we got to have money back is not going to have it. It's not spent. It's just being made available in case we did.
Right. And that's kind of where I guess that's how I approach most of this budgeting process, is that many of these items aren't things that we're saying, even the administration isn't necessarily saying we're going to spend this money. What they're saying is we want to have this line item available in case we do need to move in that direction, and then council will come back to you and we'll ask you to allocate the funds, and we'll have an ordinance to do that. So because it's in this line item in the budget does not mean it's going to get spent. What it means is it's there if we decide to spend it.
Has to come back to council.
Right.
So with all due respect to that, throughout the whole year, stuff's brought to us, and it's in the budget. So, I mean, to consider it, I think is to have discussion is necessary at points.
And I agree with you, and one of the first questions I always ask when something comes to us is this budgeted? That's a separate question for me as to whether or not we should spend the money. I don't know how everybody else looks at it, but simply because it's budgeted does not mean it gets spent, at least in my mind.
Well, in reality, it does most of the time.
Well, most of the time because it's,
Right.
it's an expense that's, that's reasonable and necessary. I mean, I'm not going to vote for something that's not reasonable and necessary. What I'm trying to say is just because the administration comes and says, well, it's in the budget, let's spend it, that's not what they do. But I'm just saying that doesn't mean it gets spent. I mean, that's what we're here for, is to make sure that, those are reasonable and necessary expenses. And this is no different. If it comes down the pike that administration comes to us and says, look, we want to do this particular study, I think then is a very appropriate time to say, let's look at that other study. What was done there? What can we use out of that? Why do we have to have another study? Why, what are the reasons for that? I don't know that's...
And Mr. Kernan, just to add that, and we don't have to belabor it much more, but I mean, we've had a number of conversations with Copley, and they were also a recipient of that EDG report. And the intention is not to redo the report; it's to build on it, right? It's to build upon that. So, again, we would have everything brought back to you guys to consider in the future.
Well, unfortunately, as you said, we've had many conversations with Copley, and they've been back and forth, so I wouldn't be basing what it is we're going to do on what Copley over there is thinking about doing.
Sure.
But we do need to look at this in a manner that we've got it back to take care of it. We know we have an issue, and people keep coming to us.
Well,
I just wanted to make sure, didn't bring it up to have a long, drawn-out conversation. I just wanted to make sure it was everybody's head that we have put out dollars on this already, and that it is utilized.
Any further discussion? All right. Was Mr. Pilot's plan to go to page 20? Is that what I heard?
Technically, the only thing left is just the transfer budget, and that's really for me.
All right, let's go ahead and look at it.
So it's
Transfer budget, any questions?
It's down $1.5 million. It's down to 900,000.
20.
I can almost assure council that I will be back to increase that budget, if nothing else, for the service department in that, because they can't operate within, they don't bring enough in revenue to run that budget. So basically, that's it for the general fund.
Okay. All right.
So next week, Mr. Pilot wanted to do the enterprise funds, and we've already done service department, fire department. So we'll probably pick up at page 36 through 76. And it should probably go even faster than tonight because those are very small accounts.
All right. Before we move on, are there any other questions regarding the parts of the budget that we covered tonight? Anything else? All right. Okay. Topics for next work session, which would be Monday, December 3rd. I assume we're going to continue to work on the budget. We'll leave it at that. Mr. Pilot can take a look at whatever other topics come up from then. Mr. Fowler and Mr. Markey, I see you looking at each other.
We're pointing at each other, trying to assign blame.
At each other.
So just
Sign blame?
Sign blame. One thing we wanted to bring, and whether it comes at next work session topic or not, just wanted to point out, and I know I've communicated this to council already, we now have final costs on the Nash Heights project. So I've sent you guys that information,
Yes.
and we'd like to get moving on getting the assessing ordinance prepared.
Okay.
And I know that's going to be some discussion involved with that, so we'd like to get that on the council agenda as soon as possible.
All right. And Carrie, if you could just check with Scott as soon as possible about getting that on. That's his call. All right. Anything else, topics for next session? Or were there any public comments tonight? No. No public comments. After we adjourn, we're going to move directly into a special council meeting. Yes,
Excuse me,
Mr.
Mr.
Fowler,
Colonel,
I'm sorry.
That's okay. There are 4 ordinances that we would like to get passed before the end of the year.
Okay.
Hearing council's wishes, Mr. Markey is in the process of preparing 3 TIF ordinances. One for McDonald's, one for Creekside Animal Clinic, and the other for Arby's.
Okay.
We're reviewing, there was one other suggestion, I'm reviewing that. If that meets that criteria, we will bring that forward as well.
Okay.
We need to get those passed before the end of the year because they have to be passed in the year in which the improvement was done.
Okay.
So I just wanted to, we didn't have those on the council agenda, but we need to get those.
Excuse me, what were those 3 again? McDonald's, Creekside, and
Arby's.
did we ever find anything out about?
That's what he was saying. He's evaluating the other one. That
Right,
you
that's why I
raised.
said I have one more I have to evaluate to make sure. And if it meets that criteria, we're going to move forward.
Great.
So that would be 4 potential. And then lastly, at Board of Control, the Board of Control passed an agreement with engineering EDG to design an improvement on Greenwich Road. There's a issue on the in front of McDonald's, essentially from the corner to about the fire station property. While the Cleveland-Massillon Road is out to bid, we would like to get this design done so that we can bid that as a separate project, but hopeful that the successful bidder on the Cleveland-Massillon Road project could do the improvement to the sewer right there in front of McDonald's. So that contract I would like to get passed before the end of the year so EDG can start that work so they can get the bid documents out. We can get it bidded in accordance to the revised code, which is 14 plus 1 day. So we need, we need some time, and that contract for Cleveland-Massillon Road will be let next Friday. So next Friday or Thursday or Friday of next week, we will know who the contractor is for the Cleveland-Massillon Road construction.
Okay. All right.
There's a pinch point. From
Right,
what
there's
we're
an
told.
issue with the pinch point.
Okay. All right. All right. Anything else under topics for next work session? After we adjourn, we're going to move right into the special council meeting, which, well, we'll take care of that then. We are adjourned, and it is, 8:25. I now call the special council meeting for Monday, November 19th, 2018 to order. Please rise for a pledge of allegiance and a moment of prayer.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Be seated. Will the clerk call the roll, please?
Mr. Gaynor?
Here.
Mr. McClone?
Here.
Mr. Carrot?
He is excused.
Mr. Towsley?
Here.
Ms. Whipke?
Here?
Mr. Kernan?
Here.
Mr. Pelot?
Mr. Pelot's excused. Under new business, executive session. Council will be moving into executive session to consider the purchase, transfer, or sale of property for public purposes as defined in Ohio Revised Code, Section 121.22G2 and Section 3.122 of the Norton City Charter, and employment matters as defined in ORC, Section 121.22G1 and Section 3.121 of the Norton City Charter. I move that council go into executive session.
Second.
Would the clerk call the roll, please?
Mr. Kernan,
Yes.
Ms. Whipke,
Yes.
Mr. Gaynor,
Yes.
Mr. McClone,
Yes.
Mr. Towsley.
Yes.
And then I would like to invite Mayor Zita, Mr. Fowler, Mr. Markey, and Mr. Messner to join. Note to all attendees, while the council is in executive session, the audio and video recording is going to continue live and uninterrupted. If you do not want your conversations recorded, please exit the council chambers. Also, just so that everyone knows, after executive session is completed, we will only be coming back then to adjourn. No further business will take place.
I think that's what Robert was trying to get me to do, but I can't remember. He mumbles when he's trying to.
I wasn't sure if that was done when we were out when I stepped out.
No, it was not done.
I think it's just me. I think I'm on the Well, there's no meeting next Monday then? I think there is. They said December. No, we're set for a council meeting. We were all hoping he's got to call off. But he's not here to do that, so we can't. But I will call you guys. Okay, because we have like one more load of stuff. I know you have your daughter coming in too. Yeah, she's coming with books. So cool, so very cool. But, yeah, I think as much as they're trying to get me on Monday. 'Cause there's only 3 more left. You're gonna be back tomorrow? Oh.
This time I get to sit up there.
Yeah, get to be one of them. I thought I saw an agenda. No, Shannon said that,
Unless you did it today.
Shannon said she wouldn't do it unless there was, a week. I think I covered. Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate it. Nico was here.
Oh.
But it would come through on your email.
Okay. But do you have a thing over there?
Or was it yesterday? What day is it? It's Monday.
When would the meeting be?
It would be Wednesday. Oh, maybe she's gonna do it for next week.
No, well, we only meet once a month, and it should have been this Wednesday.
Let me check my email.
Because we saw Shannon this afternoon.
Everything is being recorded.
Well, maybe they're planning it for next month then. I don't have anything.
No meeting. That's it. Case closed. Let's go. Have a good night.
Yes, I will. I keep going through these and putting a new favorite on top, because they're so cute.
I did that too in the house when they were hanging in the closet.
Oh, yes. I like this one. Yeah. They are really adorable. All right.
Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Yeah, we'll see you guys soon.
Yeah. It feels very nice.
Oh, I'll tell Vivian. Thank you.
Oh, okay, okay. Yeah. So she just goes whenever they need her? Yeah. Do they call her a lot?
Yeah, a couple times a week.
Oh, okay, well,
Yeah.
that's good part-time
Yeah,
job then.
exactly. And she has another job where she reads for a company called U Exams.
Okay.
So people who have special needs where they either need help with reading or
Is that what she does
recording
in
and
Norton
stuff.
Special Needs?
No, she
Oh.
does elementary.
Okay.
Everybody left. Look how they, look what are they doing? They all left. They could wait for us to come in and finish.
I would just do it.
Don't have to
We're
wait.
done.
I wouldn't wait.
You didn't wait on me last week.
I didn't? I wasn't here.
You just wanna go watch that game.
Yep.
Oh, that's what's going
You've
on
already
tonight?
scored 20 points.
Who?
Adjourned.
Are you here, Jack?
I'm here.
Call the special meeting back to order. We are adjourned.
Well, what's the big game everybody's all,
It's supposed to be the highest scoring game ever.
what? Who?
Kansas City
Football,
Chiefs. and
Kansas
LA
City
Rams.
and football game. Well, it's the over-under was like 63 points.
I know, it's already 20.
Is it really?
First quarter.